Hello guys, it's me again, Nurse CLARI, and in this video I'm going to share to you guys my review of the anatomy and physiology of the nervous system. So let's start this review of the nervous system with this question. Select all the signs and symptoms a patient can experience when the sympathetic nervous system is stimulated. Select all that apply. So this is a SATA question. So the choices are dilated pupils, number 2 bronchodilation, 3 bradycardia, 4 tachycardia, 5 excessive salivation, 6 hyperglycemia, 7 cold and clammy, 8 oliguria, 9 diarrhea. So let's answer this question after the review. So let's start it with the definition of the nervous system. The nervous system is a complex network of nerves and cells that carry messages to and from the brain and spinal cord to various parts of the body. The nervous system is made up of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So let's define first the central nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. Of course, the brain controls most body functions, including awareness, movement, sensations, thoughts, speech, and memory. While the spinal cord is connected to the brain at the brainstem and is covered by the vertebra of the spine. Nerves exit the spinal cord to both sides of the body. The spinal cord carries signals back and forth between the brain and the nerves in the rest of the body. And of course, the brain is divided into, or should I say, consists of the cerebrum, the brainstem, and the cerebellum. So let's start with the cerebrum, which is the largest part of the brain, as you can see in the picture. So the cerebrum is divided by the medial longitudinal fissure into two cerebral hemispheres, that is the right and the left, which is actually contralaterally organized, meaning the right hemisphere controls and processes signals from the left side of the body, while the left hemisphere controls and processes signals from the right side of the body. So left hemisphere, sensory stimulus from right side of body, motor control of right side of body, speech, language, and comprehension, analysis and calculations, time and sequencing, recognition of words, letters, and numbers. Right hemisphere, sensory stimulus from left side of the body, motor control of left side of body, creativity, spatial ability, context or perception, and recognition of faces, places, and objects. So what we need to remember here is that the right side of the brain controls the left, while the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. So that is the contralateral. So of course, cerebrum also contains the cerebral cortex, which has 4 lobes. We do have the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. So let's start with the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is involved in reasoning, motor control, and language. It is also important for cognitive functions and control of voluntary movement or activity. So that is actually more of cognitive. Next would be the parietal lobe. So parietal lobe processes information about temperature, taste, touch, and movement. So this is more of feelings. While the temporal lobe actually is processes memories, integrating them with sensations of taste, sound, sight, and touch. So this is more of memories and hearing. While the occipital lobe, of course, occipital lobe is responsible for our vision. So these 4 lobes are also very important in studying the nervous system. So frontal lobe more of cognitive, parietal lobe feelings, temporal lobe memories and hearing, and occipital lobe is for the vision. Now cerebellum, which stands for little brain, is a structure of the central nervous system. It has an important role in motor control, with cerebellar dysfunction often presenting with motor signs. In particular, it is active in the coordination, precision, and timing of movements, as well as in motor learning. Coordinates voluntary movements such as posture, balance, coordination, and speech, resulting in a smooth and balanced muscular activity, while the brain stem is the area of at the base of the brain that lies between the deep structures of the cerebral hemispheres and the cervical spinal cord, and it serves a critical role in regulating certain involuntary actions of the body, including heartbeat and breathing. It also acts as a relay center connecting the cerebrum and cerebellum to the spinal cord. It performs many automatic functions such as breathing, heart rate, body temperature, wake and sleep cycles. While the spinal cord is a long, thin, tubular structure made up of nervous tissue, which extends from the medulla oblongata in the brainstem to the lumbar region of the vertebral column. It encloses the central canal of the spinal cord, which contains cerebrospinal fluid. And of course, the spine is composed of 33 bones called vertebra, divided into 5 sections. And these 5 sections are cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, and coccyx bones. So, the spinal cord actually has two main functions. Transmission of nerve impulses. Neurons in the white matter of the spinal cord transmit sensory signals from peripheral region to the brain and transmit motor signals from the brain to peripheral regions. And of course, spinal reflexes. So we do have the ascending tract, which is for sensory, and descending tract for motor. This location is very important in reviewing the spinal cord injuries, because if you know the location or the problem, you would know the signs and symptoms of the patient. So we will discuss more about that on my next videos about the spinal cord injuries. So right now, let's discuss the definition of the peripheral nervous system. So peripheral nervous system is actually the part of the nervous system outside of the CNS. It is made up of nerves that send signals to and receive signals from the CNS. The PNS is actually divided into the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. So somatic nervous system, the term somatic is drawn from the Greek word soma, which means body, which is appropriate considering it is this system that transmits the information to and from the CNS to the rest of the body. So, the somatic nervous system contains two major types of neurons, which is sensory neurons and the motor neurons. Sensory neurons, also known as afferent neurons, are responsible for carrying information from the body to the CNS, while motor neurons, also known as efferent neurons, are responsible for carrying information from the brain and spinal cord to muscle fibers throughout the body. So, autonomic nervous system is a control system that acts largely unconsciously and regulates bodily functions such as the heart rate, digestion, respiratory rate, pupillary response, urination, and sexual arousal. As you can notice, the two is very easy to differentiate because the somatic nervous system is more on what we can control, while the autonomic nervous system is something that we cannot control. So that we can say that it's involuntary functions, while the somatic nervous system is voluntary functions. So autonomic nervous system, of course, is further divided into two, which is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So let's start, of course, with defining the sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is known as our fight or flight response. It prepares the body for situations that require strength and heightened awareness, or situations that arouse fear, anger, excitement, or embarrassment. While of course the parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, which initiates the rest and digest. So the parasympathetic nervous system has a calming effect on the body. It returns heart rate and breathing to normal, constrict the pupils. So this two is actually totally opposite of each other. So you can just remember one of them and you will already know the other one. Let's know more or discuss more further this parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic nerves, of course, constrict pupils, stimulate saliva, constrict airways, slow heartbeat, stimulate activity of stomach, inhibit release of glucose, stimulate gallbladder, stimulate activity of intestines, contract bladder, and promote erection. While sympathetic nerves dilate pupils, inhibit salivation, relax airways, increase heartbeat, inhibit activity of stomach, stimulate release of glucose, inhibit gallbladder, inhibit activity of intestines, secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine, relax bladder, and promote ejaculation. So you may notice that they are totally opposite of each other. Um, as for me, the way I remember this, I am just remembering someone who is hyper. Let's go ahead and check on our 12 cranial nerves. These 12 cranial nerves are very important, of course, in reviewing the anatomy and physiology of the nervous system. So the olfactory is for the smell, of course, then optic for vision, oculomotor serves muscles of the eye, trochlear serves the superior oblique eye muscle, trigeminal sensory from face and mouth, motor to muscles of mastication, abducens serves the lateral rectus eye muscles, and then facial serves the muscles of facial expression, lacrimal glands, and salivary glands, vestibulocochlear equilibrium and hearing, glossopharyngeal serves the pharynx for swallowing, posterior third of tongue, parotid salivary gland, vagus sensations from visceral organs, and parasympathetic motor regulation of visceral organs. Accessory serves muscles that move head, neck, and shoulders. Hypoglossal serves muscles of the tongue. I know that this cranial nerves is very hard to remember and to memorize because there are a lot, and of course you need to know the function of each function, but of course we do have the mnemonic for this. Even nursing schools, they are teaching us this mnemonic, and this mnemonic actually works for me, and I hope it works for you too. So that would be O to touch and feel very good velvet such heaven. That's for the name mnemonic. And while for the functions mnemonic, some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. So S for the sensory, M for the motor, and B for both. So olfactory, sensory, optic sensory, oculomotor, and trochlear are motor, trigeminal for both, abducens for motor, facial for both, vestibulocochlear sensory, glossopharyngeal and vagus both, accessory and hypoglossal are both motor. So I hope this mnemonic will work for you also, guys, because this actually helps me a lot in reviewing the cranial nerves. Now let's answer this question. Select all the signs and symptoms a patient can experience when the sympathetic nervous system is stimulated. Select all that apply. So what I tell you earlier, that you just need to memorize one of them. What I memorize only is the sympathetic nervous system. So whenever I think about the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, I think of a person who is hyper. A hyper person will have a dilated pupils, and that hyper person can breathe properly. So that's why that person has a lot of energy. So bronchodilation. That person is keep on jumping, running, so that would be tachycardia, not bradycardia. Excessive salivation is not for that hyper person, since that person can breathe properly, so there is no secretion, so excessive salivation is not. And that person is very hyper, so he needs a lot of energy. That is the reason why he's hyperglycemia. And of course, he cannot go to the bathroom because he is very hyper. So that would be oliguria. And since he cannot go to the bathroom, he will not have diarrhea. So the answers are dilated pupils, bronchodilation, tachycardia, hyperglycemia, and then, of course, oliguria. So I hope you get those answers. So right now, let's do a quick recap on what we have discussed about the anatomy and physiology of the nervous system. So the nervous system is a complex network of nerves and cells that carry messages to and from the brain and spinal cord to various parts of the body. And of course, the nervous system is made up of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. And the central nervous system is further divided or made up of the brain and the spinal cord, while the brain is made up or consists of cerebrum, cerebellum, and the brainstem. So the cerebrum, being the largest part of the brain, is contralaterally organized, meaning the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body and the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. It also contains the cerebral cortex, which has four lobes: the frontal, which is more on cognitive; the parietal, about feelings; temporal lobe, which is more on memories and hearing; and then last one is the occipital lobe, which is responsible for the vision. Now, the cerebellum is our little brain, which has an important role with our motor control, while the brainstem's role is actually body's involuntary function, including our heartbeat and breathing. And of course, our spinal cord. Spinal cord is divided into five sections: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, and coccyx. But we can just focus on our cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine. Just remember, when reviewing the spinal cord, they are connected to each other in that they have the ascending tract and descending tract. Ascending tract, which is responsible for our sensory functions, while descending tract responsible for the motor functions. So when reviewing the spinal cord injury, we would know it is very important to know the location of the problem. In that way, we will know the signs and symptoms of the patient. Like for example, if the patient has a problem with their cervical, so the patient will be having quadriplegic, while the lumbar spine, possible the patient will be paraplegic. Okay, So, of course, it is also very important to know the cranial nerves, which will be discussed on my next video for the neuronursing assessment. So, let's now discuss or recap on PNS, or the peripheral nervous system, is a nervous system outside the CNS, which is divided into somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Somatic nervous system has two neurons, sensory and motor neurons. Sensory is also known as afferent neuron, and motor neurons is also known as efferent neurons. Just remember that somatic nervous system is more on voluntary, while autonomic nervous system is involuntary. It is further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight response, while parasympathetic nervous system initiates rest and digest. And like what I said earlier, I remember sympathetic nervous system as someone who is hyper. So that's it for the anatomy and physiology of the nervous system. I hope this helped you guys, and hope to see you on my next video about the neuronursing assessment. This is just my review, and I hope to help my co-nurses in reviewing or preparing for their NCLEX exam. Thank you so much. Stay tuned, guys. On my next video, I'll be discussing the assessment of the nervous system. Thank you for watching. See you.